Hello, I'm Mike Bellamy, founder of PassageMaker Sourcing Solutions and the blogger behind AnotherChinaBlog.com. I've been living in China full-time now for over 12 years, and it is my pleasure to let you behind the bamboo curtain and offer some practical tips to protect your intellectual property in China. First off, I want to say that the majority of suppliers are a pleasure to deal with, but it is still best to protect yourself by following some basic protocols which will help you avoid losing control of your intellectual property. Number one rule, register your IP, intellectual property, in China before you even start to source here. China is a first to register rather than first to market system. That means even if you have a really cool logo or design and it has not been registered in Beijing, then anybody can register it and you would have to pay them to get it back. Even if everybody back home, and even if everybody in China knows you are the rightful originator of that brand or intellectual property, you will still be fighting a steep uphill battle in China if you fail to register it first. Now some good news. Assuming you register in advance in China, a Chinese court will give even foreign companies a fair shake. In the past few years, the legal system in China has made great progress, and there is much more of a level playing field when it comes to the courts. Now some more good news. If you hire a Chinese lawyer in China who speaks English, it doesn't cost a lot to register your intellectual property, and God forbid, if you have to litigate because your IP was infringed upon, the costs of a court battle in China are but a fraction of the cost back home, assuming you're from an expensive place like the United States or Europe, and assuming that you are using local yet professional lawyers in China. Now, I don't provide legal services, but if you need a lawyer, email me and I'll put you in touch with the firms that have represented me successfully in China. Rule number two, reduce your exposure to losing IP during the request for quotation phase. When you are conducting your request for quotation, getting quotes from multiple suppliers, you'll probably interact with dozens of suppliers to get their quotations. But in the end, you'll probably just select one or two to give them your business. A non-disclosure agreement signed in advance with those suppliers that you didn't end up selecting is not going to do much to prevent them from using your IP. Plus, monitoring all those suppliers is very hard. So during the request for quotation process, do all you can not to let the idea out of the bag. For example, conduct your RFQ with a representative product which doesn't expose your IP. Then after you pick your best supplier, narrow it down to just a few suppliers and let them get a look at the idea only after you feel confident they will protect your IP. By the way, if you're worried your supplier may steal your IP, know that there are third-party contract assembly centers in China which you can hire to be your black box. In this fashion, your appointed sub-suppliers send the various components to this black box in China where the final assembly and final branding takes place. This way, the sub-suppliers, they don't see how the pieces come together, and they're in the dark about your logo, designs, and other intellectual property. Rule number three, use simple and easy to understand clauses in your bilingual contracts. I have found that many conflicts between foreign buyers and Chinese factories stem from poorly explained contracts. Not always poorly written, but poorly explained. It is not so much that the suppliers are breaking the terms of the agreement on purpose. It often turns out they never understood the contract in the first place. So often, the buyer presents a massive technical contract in English only, which some New York lawyer has drafted to protect the buyer. There are some key terms buried in there which are important about who owns the IP and how the IP should be used or protected. The supplier knows that if he signs this agreement, he gets the order. So he signs without having it translated, let alone understanding it word for word. So what I suggest is you keep it simple, put it in Chinese, limit it to a few pages, and get clear confirmation that the supplier has read and understood it. Most of my suppliers are honorable people, and if we are clear on the terms relating to intellectual property in advance of starting production, I generally have very few problems. See you next time, wishing you successful China sourcing.